Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast, where we are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the workplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every week, we have the opportunity to bring on authors, speakers, coaches, leaders, and nonprofits who are also passionate about putting God back in business. And folks, it's no different this week. I'm very excited for our guest, but let me tell you a little bit more about him. Frankie Capparelli is the director of people strategy and brand at Rushton, a CPA firm in Gainesville, Georgia. He focuses on developing leaders, strengthening organizational culture, and aligning people strategy with business growth. With experience spanning retail, nonprofit, technology, and professional services, Frankie is known for his ability to read people well, navigate complex workplace dynamics, and guide leaders through meaningful change. Beyond his corporate work, Frankie is the author of Stuckness Within the Stronghold, where he explores how patterns of thinking quietly shape beliefs, behaviors, and leadership outcomes. Through his writing and coaching, he helps leaders identify hidden patterns, break cycles that keep them stuck, and move towards greater clarity, responsibility, and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, Frankie Capparelli. Frankie, what's going on, man?
Not much, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. That was a mouthful.
Well, it's because God has graced you to do, and that's a perfect segue, Frankie, because we know that you just didn't wake up in 2026, and obviously you being a former baseball player, you've taken a lot of balls and strikes,
Yes, sir.
and we'll let you talk to the audience about what that process and what those reps did to get you to where you are today. So talk to us about the journey, Frankie, that God has brought you on
Man.
personally and professionally.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was raised in South Florida. Two beautiful, amazing parents, loving family. I got two younger brothers, and as you can imagine, with two younger brothers, 20 months apart, there's a lot of competition, a lot of fun. And as I grew, I went to school, played some baseball and football at a D1 school, and tore my ACL. And when you grow up, baseball for me personally was my life.
Mm,
And when I tore my ACL in that first year, that was pretty crushing. I just didn't. I that was everything for me. Of course, I was saved at 12, got baptized a little bit later. Um, God has always been first, but you kind of just don't see that sometimes. The baseball, the thing that's in front. So, long story short, go to school, go back home, go back to a different university, graduate, and I meet my beautiful wife. It'll be 22 years, yeah, this year, and have three beautiful children. And through that time, it's like any marriage. There's so many highs and so many lows, and working a lot. And we have, I've worked from Apple to Microsoft, so there's a lot of different experiences, and that demanded a lot of time. And I would say around 39 years old, I finally believe I became a man. That's going to sound
mm,
weird to the listeners. It's not when I grew a beard or anything like that, but it was really about where my heart was. And yes, there's been a lot of balls and strikes. There's about a lot of strikeouts, um, which wasn't a thing for me. But I usually made contact. But it was odd striking out a lot for me.
mm.
And I had to change the posture of my heart. I had to get God back in first. I had to change my mindset. And so I'm at this stage in life where the last 10 years have been beautiful. I think it's because of the relationship with God, because of the relationship with my wife, how we go and pursue God together. I think that's super
Mm.
important. So beginning years, a lot of different, a lot of tough spots, brain surgery, got hit on a motorcycle at about 100 miles an hour. A
Wow.
lot of different things that sometimes I never thought I'd make it to 40.
Mm,
And God's good. God's so gracious. He had plans for me. And every day I wake up, I said, you know what? If I wake up this morning, that means God's got something for me. And so I
mm.
need to make the best of it. So fast forward to now, over 20 years in leadership. I've, like you said, or when you introduced me, a lot of different kinds of industries. And I am now in the CPA accounting world and lead a team of 70 plus from the HR seat, also in charge of the branding piece as well. And so, it's pretty exciting. It's a little bit different.
Frankie, you said, appreciate you sharing that, man. You said
Yeah,
a few different things. A big one, and you and I have talked offline about
yeah, yeah,
this.
for sure.
You said, man, at this age, I really became a man. And that could sound jarring to some folks like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? And folks, he's got, for a YouTube audience, he's got a great beard too, just for the record.
Appreciate
He's got a great beard.
that.
But, Frankie, there's a lot of, if people are really honest, there's a lot of folks like that where they realize like, it wasn't really till I hit this season of life that God really just, wow. And so you talked a lot about mindset. What were um, some of the things that you had to undo or allow God to undo that I think it's John Acuff that talks about tapes, or I forget the book that he has, stories that are playing,
Yeah,
soundtracks,
you
that's what it
go.
was. Soundtracks. So what soundtracks did you have to undo that you had to surrender to God that really was like, you know what? I used to think this way and now I think this way and I am flourishing by the grace of God.
Well, there's a lot. That's a very good question. Little background: I'm a perfectionist, so the inner critic in my head, that soundtrack, is
Mm,
super loud. Like I don't, there's no volume to turn down sometimes, especially when I was all the way up to I was 39. Failure was huge, and there's a certain part of my life. It wasn't at 39, but before it, right before it, we almost lost everything. It was a
mm,
rough year. Lost my father in 2011, roughly around that time, and that hit hard because really didn't have anyone that real close to me besides granddad or something like that. But my dad, that was a big deal. And that made me look as a father even more so like life is so short. And how am I an example to my kids and to my wife? And pride is one of those things. So to answer your
mm.
question directly, the other one is ego, which could be,
Okay.
they can kind of go together. And ego to me is just excluding God out. And
Mm,
so um, I'm not a loud individual by nature. I'm not, I'm usually make sure it's at 100%. And then I'll do a little celebration, but I'm not that kind of an individual. So for me, the pride was a little bit more quiet. The ego was a
gotcha.
little bit more quiet, right? And then I turned that inside out and I said, okay, my wife is someone's daughter. So
Hmm.
I need to ensure that I have a daughter, and how would I want that individual to treat her? And it wasn't treating her bad. I could just give her more. I could give her more. I could lead her better, spiritually. Um, and then those moments that are sticky throughout the day, like positive words that can support her or the kids, making time out for her and for the kids, putting two knees down and saying, hey, how can I serve you? As a man, we need to lead our families. I think we feel like leading our families is it's more of just putting food on the table and being macho, being quiet, but our kids are watching our wives are watching us. And truth be told, we both lead the family, but we do have our responsibilities. And one thing my wife said to me once is that, Frankie, you're the rock of the family. When I see you nervous or stressed, this family feels it. And
Mm.
we start worrying because you're the rock, because you're supposed to lead this family. So for me, that was like it
Wow.
completely blew mind blowing, because when you hear it, it's different. When you kind of know it's there, you're just like, okay, it's kind of like you kind of push it to the side. But that hit me hard. And so I just said to myself, from that day on, I need to lead this family more spiritually. I need to make church non-negotiable. Wednesdays for the kids, it was a non-negotiable. Praying with my wife before we go to bed, it was a non-negotiable. So those are the kind of things that I needed to change. I needed to set the example. So that
Mm.
39, that was my promise to myself and God. I had to steward the things that He gave me. And and that is worship when you think about it. That is part of the worship family when you think of worship as a whole. So that's what changed me a little bit is being knocked down and I getting back up, and I don't want to be knocked down again. So yeah, good question.
I hear you. That was Frankie, that was powerful, man. Sometimes it's good for people to hear those thoughts and that journey out loud because there's so many other people that I'm sure they've had similar process, but they've never said it out loud. So thank you for saying the thing. Sometimes it's behind closed doors out loud. And Frankie's absolutely right, folks. A lot of it mindset, man. When your mindset shifts and you allow God to work, and if you were listening, it affected everything. His leadership, his household, you learn how to, we talk about this a lot in a CBMC, the leader journey, lead yourself, lead another person, lead a team, lead an organization. And Frankie, you're literally living example, like your experience. And we'll touch on, your work at Rushton here in a second, but literally leading yourself, leading another person, your wife, leading a team, arguably the family. Now you're leading an organization, financially. Like that's the leader journey right there. And folks, you may not quote unquote, be a C-suite leader, but at minimum you're going to lead a team and that's your family. And that's exactly what Frankie has outlined and all the soundtracks he had to undo and let go and let God. So I just didn't want
Yeah,
people to miss the nuggets that you were putting
yeah.
down, Frankie.
Well, I appreciate that, Jason. Sometimes you just think back on it, you just like that's just that was my life. But you're right. We have to speak up and we have to be able to say those things. And it's really sometimes when we say things, it's actually we can start believing and like, whoa, I can't believe this came out, right? So, and by the way, when you're leading a team, your family is probably the most important team you need to be leading, right?
Mm.
So, um, I appreciate that. Yeah, we try every
That's
day, don't we?
Yeah, it's a mic drop right there, folks. Lead
Uh,
the team. Most important team is your family. Like we could be done right there.
Uh, Jay, that's that whole side about mindset. We'll get into it later. But that is how I got to the book. So we'll
Mm,
get through that. Yep.
I love it. See,
Yep.
folks, he gave us a post-credit scene. We're gonna pay off that post-credit scene with the book. Frankie, tell us a little bit about your role at Rushton. You're director of people strategy and brand, CPA firm in
Sure.
Gainesville, Georgia. Um, what do you do day to day, and how do you lead the organization from your role?
Absolutely. So I wear a couple of different hats underneath that. So the director of people strategy is a nice fancy word for HR. And then the brand part is a nice fancy word for marketing. But when you put them together, it sounds pretty cool. So what I did day to day is everything under the sun when it comes to people. The only thing I do not do is payroll. Thank you, Jesus. I would just not my that is not my jam. But so when you were talking through hiring, separation, we're talking about people strategy on budgets. We're talking through salary, looking at salaries and insurance and every year and making sure we're where we need to be. We're talking about development. We're talking about progression plans. We're talking everything under the sun with budgets. It's just a whole lot of stuff that we change management. Um, what do we future building, right? So it's a big overall it's huge. I do benefits as well, which we're in that season here. So a lot of stuff there. Uh, I also act in a very much way with work with the COO and the also the managing partner, because HR is in everything. When you think about it, people is in the nucleus of an organization. Without people, you can't run a business.
Mhm.
Um, and so because of that, you have to be, your hand is in everything.
Mm.
Sometimes your fingers are in the jar, and sometimes your wrist, your whole hand and the wrist is in the jar. And HR is it's a very servitude kind of position. There's a lot of strategy behind it, of course. It can definitely push the business one way or the other, but is a very much as a server. There's a lot of serving going on,
Mm.
and then sometimes you have the other things like just employees want to talk. Um, they
Mhm.
don't. They want to have an unbiased individual that they could just talk to and get some advice. A lot of times I'm talking personal stuff with them. They feel comfortable, and that's a great thing. At Rushton, one of the things that I am very proud about is that I can speak openly about my faith,
Mm.
and the firm does the same internally, and so it's a beautiful thing. I think there's a lot of blessing over the firm because we are not shy about our faith, and when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that's what I do for the most part. In a nutshell, it's there's a lot of little things, but we can be talking all day about my about my position.
Frankie, how do you navigate in your role and you wear multiple hats? How do you navigate working in HR knowing that sometimes HR carries a negative um, reputation
Right.
or difficult reputation? There's a lot of different adjectives I'm sure that you've heard, a lot of different
Mhm.
stereotypes. What's your approach to HR and how do you let God use you in that space? Um, Being relational and meeting people where they're at. Like you said, people want to talk. How do you navigate that when things
Mm.
can be so negative about the HR discipline?
That's a great question. I think you said it pretty perfectly there, being relatable.
Hmm.
I can only be myself. And for me, I have to bring myself. I try to act like someone else or try to act what the position entails. It's going to be harder for me. And so, what I know well is being a husband and being a dad. So what does that look like? So being relatable, you're going to have all sorts of topics come under the sun that come to you, and being able to see and using my faith and just being able to say, hey, I want to look at everyone in front of me as if Jesus was looking at them. And
Hmm.
how would that relationship or that conversation go? I can never be Jesus, so I just want to make that point, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm trying to say is, how can I be more like Jesus in every moment? Um, you know, Getting a little bit diving a little bit deeper. I think understanding who they are across the table. Not everybody's the same, so I can't imprint myself on other people. That's I think a carnal rule, a carnal thing that we do in society, is that we get so angry at people because they're not like us, and really is what we're saying. Like we need to have the same thoughts, the same ideas, we vote the same, we run our families the same. It's just not how it works. We're all individuals. Kind of, if you just look at our hands, our fingerprints are different for everybody. That's on purpose. So for me in the job place, understanding where they're coming from, hearing the whole story, or hearing what their opinion or what they would like to see change, it's a high value. Like I just don't dismiss it. And I think
Hmm.
once we start relating to that, it's a lot easier. Also, little things like we take the Enneagram at Rushton. I'm not sure if some of the listeners have taken that before, but it's under the motive, it's under the personality test stuff, but it's really about the core motivation of the individual.
Hmm.
And so what motivates them every day? It also helps us understand when they're in stress or when they're in growth. For us, that's super important, because when you're sitting in front of an employee, and we're sitting in a group of, let's say, of a team, and we're talking about how we are going to disseminate a project, understanding why everyone's there is super important. And if you want to take it a step further, explaining to the team why A, B, C, all of these people are here, how they're going to contribute. A lot of it's got to do with how they are motivated and how we can use their skill sets even better. a lot of times people are in positions and they don't do well. It's because maybe we didn't put them in the right position because of what motivates them.
Mm.
Sometimes they're not working under the right leader, and that is affecting their performance. How they communicate, how the leader communicates. Sometimes they're just we need to change the way that we communicate so the employee can actually get more out of that person. So for me, that's kind of what it looks like. And I think when we look at HR, we always say, "Oh my gosh, HR just emailed me. Am I in trouble?" Well, guess what? There's something towards that a little bit. But here's the thing: that's a misconception. HR is not HR is usually at the end game. You've had your conversations with your leader. You understand what's going on. So if it ever gets to that point, it's not a surprise.
Mhm.
Leaders in the workplace are should be handling these situations, the conflict management, right? All those things, the things that I guess to your question puts the stigma on an HR professional.
Mm.
And so, but when like anything, when we're on the same page, we're all communicating, expectations are set. A lot of times, we can remove some of that stigma, right? And so, I think in my role, um, I'm hoping, I pray that people don't tag me in HR. I don't know, I'm not in their heads, but how they interact with me seems pretty healthy. um, plus I like to have fun, so
Mm.
at the end of the day, I think that's very relatable too. So, but you're right. Sometimes HR can get that stigma,
Mhm.
and it comes with it comes with it. What are you gonna do?
Mm. The folks kind of like farmer's insurance. He knows a thing or two because he's seen a thing or two. He's done some peopling.
Yeah, there we go. It's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we talked off air a little bit, but um, when it comes to interactions and whatnot, we just got to be able to do the best we can,
Hmm.
and in line with how Jesus would do it, and that and taking the stress away and giving it to Him. And a lot of times for me, I walk into a meeting or a conversation with somebody, I'm always praying the Holy Spirit, just give me wisdom, ease the
Mm.
ease
It's
the
good.
room.
It's good.
There's some conflict management conversations, like we got to have some hard conversation. That's sometimes really hard because you care about the person across the table. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can't do that by myself. I need wisdom. You know where wisdom comes from. So pretty cool.
Folks, if Frankie didn't even realize that he was setting us up. I told you we're going to come back to that post credit scene. All of these things that Frankie's been talking about the whole time are what get people stuck. And ironically, Frankie has written a book, and that book is called Stuckness Within the Stronghold. So, Frankie, I feel like a lot of the conversation we've been teeing up
Oh
what
man.
you've written about. But what was the inspiration for the book and what's it about?
Man, I'm really happy that we talked about the other stuff. I'm
Hmm.
super excited about talking about the book. I'll tell you why. A couple of things. So first off, you already know about a little bit of my life story. The listeners heard just tad, but getting to that 39. I've always wanted to write. Like I always wanted to write officially. Always journaled. But sometimes I would try to start a fictional book. It was terrible. That wasn't my jam. But I always wanted to write. And I finally understood why my words never really made sense because I wasn't ready. I
Mm.
I knew I wasn't living the life I should have been living. I didn't. The scales were still in my eyes, like an axe talks about. And as I grew closer to God, which I believe completely, as you read in Deuteronomy, proximity has accountability. There's a responsibility to proximity to God. And as I got closer to God, I started having those scales fall off my eyes. And I realized there's so much more that I can contribute to other people. And the Lord just said, tapped me on the shoulder and he said, it's time. And
Mm.
so I prayed about what to write about. I didn't know what the topic was going to be, but I said to myself, and the Lord I should just probably say that the Lord put into my head was write what you know. Write
Mm,
what you have experienced, because what you experience will be genuine, and people are experiencing exactly what you're experiencing. So for me, that's how it all started, and this book wasn't written for people who were failing. It was written for people who were trying hard, doing the right things, and still feeling like misaligned on the inside.
mm,
And I've talked to so many people. I can't even tell you. I can't even. It's so many people where everyone felt that they're trying so hard they can't get further. They feel like they're doing the right things, but they still felt like something was off. And
mm,
I noticed that, like, and I believed for a long time, but I noticed that most people think they are stuck because they lack motivation or discipline. And
mm,
honestly, Jason, that's hardly true. And I truly believe that stuckness is a form state, and I can
mm.
get into that, but I truly believe that. Um, but that's how it got started, and it came from my life experiences and the Lord saying, "It's time. Let's do this." So,
I love it. I love the title, Frankie, because we've all been stuck. But then you get caught, and you use this word a lot in the book, cycles. It's one thing to
mm,
be stuck, but then you get in these cycles, and then you get misaligned. And so when a reader picks up this book, Frankie, what can they expect? Because I think
oh,
the title's vivid enough in one way, but then when they start open up these pages, what are some of the aha moments they may find as they crack it open?
yeah. So the book was written in a very conversational tone. I
Hmm.
wanted the I wanted the reader to feel like there was a mentor. They were reading and they were talking to a mentor.
That's good.
There is some contrarian side to it. I do call out the men a little bit. I do call out some people who, not people, but just call out the reader and say, "Hey, I need you to check yourself on this." Lots of thought provoking questions that you can contemplate on and reflect on. But what you're going to get out of this book is there's you're going to experience some behaviors that are very common that we've all done, and I've experienced all these behaviors, and you're going to see how easily it could turn into a cycle. So let me ask you this, Jason:
Hmm.
how true is this question? How true is this statement? And this is part of why the book was written. The thoughts you entertain become the truth that you speak,
Mm.
and the truth that you speak becomes the seed planted in someone else's soul. And so when you think of that, the thoughts that entertain our minds is how we perform in the world. And
Yeah.
this is the whole book is really prefaced on 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. And basically we need to break the strongholds of all those fleshy things in the world, but we have to keep our thoughts captive.
Yeah.
And so when I was mentioning earlier that I believe stuckness is a form state, see, I believe that our thoughts form our beliefs, and then our beliefs justify our behaviors.
Hmm.
And then when our behaviors, when repeated, they form cycles, which you mentioned earlier. And those cycles eventually create a version of normal that feels safe for us.
Mm.
And so when you think about it, go back to the beginning. It's like, it's the thought that I had. And that's
Hmm.
what turned into a belief. And now I believe in this so much. I'm going to
Hmm.
justify why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then they form a cycle. Now I say, this is who I am. And you're
Hmm.
like, wait a minute, where did that come from? That thought?
Mm.
Like, so I think so that's what happens. And that's what the whole book's about. And then the second half of the book is basically freedom on how to break those cycles.
Mm.
Very scripture based. And so I had to keep our Savior involved in all of this because this is his work. Um, so yeah, so that is in the nutshell what the book's about. So if you're somebody who is stuck in life, stuck in a behavior, maybe you even know what the behaviors that you're stuck in. I promise you, when you read the book, one of those 7 behaviors you will cling to, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's me," and I don't want to get it to a cycle. You might
Mm.
be in a cycle of life thinking that's who you are, and you read the cycle part and you're like, oh my goodness, that's what's happening. Here's some scripture, here's some thought-provoking questions. Here's some things that can get you out of that cycle. So
Mm.
um, it's I think it's I really encourage even if you don't buy the book, just think about what your thoughts are to the listeners, how you're starting your day, how you go into a meeting, how you talk to someone that you normally would pull the brakes on, because our
Hmm.
thoughts do form our beliefs, and we got to keep them captive.
Frankie, you've got them salivating by now. Where can people get a copy of Stuckness?
So right now it's on Amazon. So if you just put Stuckness or my last name Capparelli, Capparelli, you could easily find it. And that's on Amazon. It will be out in some other areas as well, like Barnes and Noble and whatnot. But that just takes some time. But yeah, you can find it there.
Folks, you heard it from the man himself. We'll have Stuckness in the show notes. Make sure you get your copy. Frankie, before we get ready to go, folks, I could talk to Frankie and he knows this already. I could talk to him another like 3 or 4
Man, I have this
hours.
same thing, brother.
But we can't, we have to let him go. But before he goes, Frankie, when you think about the back end of 2026, it's crazy how fast this year is going by. Is there anything new, exciting that you're working on, an upcoming event? What are you looking forward to second half of 2026?
I well, the number one thing is obviously getting closer to God.
Hmm.
I cannot wait to see what He has for me. There might be, He's whispering in my ear about another book.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think the book, the Stuckness book, by the way, is for anybody, any age, male, female. It's not anything specific. It's about life, right, and leadership, and how we can get aligned more with Jesus. But this new one that He's whispering in my ear has been on my mind for a while. The topic, and it's going to speak to men specifically. It's going to be a hard book to read for men because they're going to be. I'm praying the Holy Spirit convicts them in a good way.
Mm.
Um, I think it's time for the men to act like men in this world. I think we need to step up, and I'm hoping this book speaks to that. So
Folks, it sounds like there's exciting things to come that Frankie's working on. I love, we've had a few people on in the past, Frankie, where they gave us a little teaser about like you heard it first on the Fortified Life. They're working on, they got something coming down the pipeline. So we're gonna have to have Frankie back when he
sir,
writes the next one. So I'm excited about and looking forward to that as well, Frankie.
thank you.
Well, Frankie, what is the best way? We obviously we've got the book, but
Yeah.
what's the best way for listeners to stay up with what you're doing, connect with you? Because, you're just dropping all these nuggets of gold and you're just gonna leave here. But how do people, hey man, where can I find Frankie at? He's talking about baseball and mindsets and stuck and soundtracks. Where can I find him at though?
Man, Jason, I need more Jason in my life, man. You can make someone feel real good too. I love it, brother. Well, you can find me easily on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Just type my name in, and you'll find me there. There's also, if you enjoy, 5 minute reads, 7 minute reads, I have a newsletter as well on LinkedIn. It's called Crafted and
Mm.
Called. And I usually put something out every other week. And it's on leadership and spirituality mixed together. So I think that's my wheelhouse. That's where God's called me. You can also, if you ever want to contact me, info@capparelli.net is my email. So just info@capparelli.net. But LinkedIn is the best way to connect, and looking forward to it.
I love it, Frankie. This has been so exciting, so much fun. We're gonna have to have a round two when you
Let's do
have
it.
the next book out. But Frankie, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with us here on the Fortified Life.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, Jason. Appreciate
For
it.
sure. Well, folks, you will have all of Frankie's information in the show notes. You'll be able to purchase a copy of Stuckness. Check out Frankie on LinkedIn, and please do subscribe to his newsletter. He's got some really powerful things that he shares on there. So you want to make sure you subscribe to that and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. JerichoForce.com/podcast or FortifiedLifePodcast.com for the show notes. Well, folks, you know how we leave things. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to the Fortified Life Podcast, our YouTube audience at the Fortified Life on YouTube, and search for the Fortified Life Podcast on your podcast platform of choice, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I promise you, if they air podcasts, you can get a hold of us. But we'll see you next time on the Fortified Life Podcast.